If you think you know the real story behind Alcatraz, think again. Hit subscribe now, because what we uncovered will haunt you. Comment below what you think happened. Let's go. The morning everything changed. It was January 15th, 2019. San Francisco Bay lay silent and still, wrapped in fog so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The golden sun hadn't risen yet. On a dock near Pier 33, a maintenance worker named Marcus Webb was arriving early for his shift. He worked for the National Park Service, responsible for keeping Alcatraz Island ready for the thousands of tourists who visited the abandoned prison each year. Marcus had done this job for 8 years. He knew every corner of that island, every rusted cell block, every echoing hallway. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what he'd discover that morning. As he made his way up the stone path toward the main prison building, something caught his eye. A door. Locked, rusted, barely visible behind overgrown vegetation near the prison's east wall. Marcus had walked past this spot hundreds of times. He'd never noticed it before. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness as he approached. The padlock securing the door was old, corroded by salt air and decades of neglect. But something was different. The rust on the lock was fresh. Scratches surrounded the keyhole, as if someone had been working on it recently. Very recently. Marcus's pulse quickened. He pulled out his radio and called it in. Within 40 minutes, federal agents from the FBI's San Francisco field office were on the island. Special Agent Jennifer Cross arrived with her partner, a young investigator named David Chen. Jennifer had worked 13 years in the bureau, specializing in cold cases and historical crimes. She'd never heard of an unauthorized door on Alcatraz. Nobody had. It shouldn't exist, the park superintendent told her, his face pale. That section of the island was sealed off in 1963, when the prison closed. There's nothing back there. It's just rock and old infrastructure. But Jennifer wasn't convinced. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming. The lock was photographed, catalogued, and carefully removed. Behind the corroded metal door lay a narrow concrete staircase, descending into absolute darkness. The air that emerged was stale, heavy with moisture and something else. Something organic. Something wrong. Get a hazmat team down here, Jennifer commanded. And get me every historical record of this location. Someone's been down there. Recently. The staircase led to an underground chamber, roughly 30 feet below the prison's main level. The walls were concrete, sweating with condensation. Water pooled on the floor. And there, in the corner, secured to a metal hook embedded in the wall, was a chain. The chain was old, but the lock was new. And attached to that chain was a skeleton. The remains had been there for months, maybe longer. The clothing was deteriorated, but visible enough to confirm what everyone feared. This was human. This was a crime scene. And it had been hidden beneath one of America's most notorious prisons for a very long time. Check the walls, Jennifer ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Check everywhere. As the team fanned out with their lights and cameras, they found something else. Scratched into the concrete wall, in crude, desperate letters, were words. They knew. They all knew. Over the next 3 hours, the chamber revealed more horrors. A sleeping bag, bottles, a logbook, and most chilling of all, a series of photographs pinned to the wall. They showed a man, gaunt and terrified, photographed over what appeared to be several months. But the most shocking discovery came when agents examined the prison's administrative records from 1963. A guard named Robert Whitmore had gone missing the day Alcatraz closed. He'd been declared a suicide, jumped into the bay according to the official report. But there was no body, no witness, just a note, found in his quarters, that said, "I can't live with what I've done." The skeleton was tested. The DNA matched Robert Whitmore's family records from 1963. But that was impossible. The remains showed signs of being alive for weeks, possibly months after his supposed death. The photographs on the wall stretched across at least a 6-month period. Then, during a deeper search of the administrative files, Jennifer found something that made her blood run cold. A memorandum, dated March 1962, written in the warden's private notes, Officer Whitmore knows too much about the program. He's become unstable. Recommend immediate reassignment or permanent silencing. What program? Jennifer asked the Park Service director. What the hell was Whitmore involved in? The director's face went white. There are rumors, he said quietly. Rumors about experiments. Psychological tests conducted on the most dangerous inmates. But nothing was ever proven. Those files were destroyed in 1965. As the sun set over San Francisco Bay that evening, Jennifer stood on the dock, staring back at Alcatraz. Whitmore's skeleton was being transported to the lab. His family was being contacted. But one question burned in her mind, growing bigger and more dangerous with every passing minute. If someone was willing to murder a prison guard to keep a secret, and then hide his body beneath the prison itself, what exactly was Robert Whitmore protecting? And more terrifyingly, was whoever killed him still alive? The answer to that question would shatter everything they thought they knew about Alcatraz. And it would lead them down a path of betrayal, corruption, and murder that reached far beyond the prison's crumbling walls. Jennifer didn't know it yet, but she was about to uncover a conspiracy that had been buried for 56 years. And the people responsible were watching. Waiting. Ready to do anything to keep their secret safe. The FBI lab in Quantico had Robert Whitmore's remains for 72 hours before the first bombshell arrived. Jennifer Cross was sitting at her desk, drowning in cold coffee and older case files, when her phone rang. It was Dr. Patricia Huang, the forensic anthropologist leading the examination. You need to see this in person, Patricia said. Her voice was tense, controlled, but Jennifer could hear the tremor underneath. I can't explain it over the phone. It doesn't make sense. Jennifer was on a plane to Virginia within 6 hours. The examination room at Quantico was climate-controlled, clinical, but nothing could strip away the weight of what lay on the metal table in front of them. Robert Whitmore's skeleton had been carefully cleaned and reconstructed. But it was what Patricia showed Jennifer next that changed everything. The bones tell a story, Patricia explained, pointing to the ribcage with a metal probe. And this story is horrifying. Look at these fractures. They're old, healed. But look at the pattern. Deliberate trauma. Repeated, methodical trauma. Someone broke this man's ribs multiple times over an extended period. Not to kill him. To torture him. Jennifer felt her stomach drop. How long? Weeks. Maybe months. He survived each assault. That takes a special kind of cruelty. Patricia's jaw clenched. But that's not the worst part. The skull shows defensive wounds. He fought back. He was conscious, aware, while someone was breaking his body apart. Patricia pulled up X-rays on a light screen. There's more. Traces of a rare compound in the bone marrow. A sedative, but not one commonly used in the 1960s. This was experimental. Someone was medicating him. Keeping him docile enough to be controlled, but conscious enough to feel everything. The walls seemed to close in on Jennifer. You're telling me Robert Whitmore was kept alive down there? Tortured? For months? Years, actually, Patricia corrected quietly. I ran carbon dating on the bone degradation. He was alive and suffering for at least 4 years before he died. Maybe longer. 4 years. In an underground chamber beneath a prison. No one knowing. No one coming to help. Back in San Francisco, Jennifer started pulling strings. She needed to know what Robert Whitmore knew. She needed to understand what the program was, and who was running it. The Alcatraz archives had been partially transferred to the National Archives in Washington, but the sensitive files, the psychological evaluation records, the inmate behavior documentation, everything related to experimental programs had been classified. And when Jennifer began making calls to access those files, doors started closing. Her supervisor, Deputy Director Marcus Sullivan, called her into his office. Back off the Alcatraz angle, he said flatly. Focus on identifying who killed Whitmore. That's a solvable case. The program, whatever it was, is ancient history. Someone tortured him for years, Jennifer shot back. Someone kept him imprisoned beneath a prison. That doesn't just happen. There were conspirators. Officials. People in positions of power. Exactly my point, Marcus said coldly. And those people, if they're still alive, are connected to some very important institutions. We don't have the political capital to investigate this. I'm reassigning you. Jennifer couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're burying it. I'm being practical. Let it go. But Jennifer Cross didn't let things go. It wasn't in her nature. That night, she made an unauthorized call to an old contact, a retired archivist named Eleanor Pierce who had worked at Alcatraz during its final years. Eleanor was 86, living in a small apartment in Berkeley, and her memory was sharp as a blade. The program, Eleanor said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. We called it Mindhouse. It was psychiatric research. The military was funding it. They wanted to understand how to break a man's will, how to extract information, how to reprogram behavior. The military. Jennifer's pulse quickened. Which branch? All of them, as far as I could tell. The Navy, the Army, even intelligence agencies. They'd send inmates to Alcatraz, the most dangerous prisoners, and they'd conduct experiments. Sensory deprivation. Controlled substances. Psychological manipulation. Some of the inmates came back. Different. Damaged. Some didn't come back at all. And Robert Whitmore. Eleanor's breath caught. Robert was a good man. Honest. When he found out what was happening, he wanted to report it. He was going to talk to the FBI. But then he disappeared. They said he jumped into the bay. Everyone knew it was a lie, but no one did anything. This was 1963. People were afraid. The government had power we couldn't challenge. The line went silent for a long moment. Agent Cross, Eleanor said finally. If you're really investigating this, be careful. The people who ran that program didn't just disappear in 1963. Some of them went into other government positions. Positions of influence. They'll protect their secrets. 3 days later, Eleanor Pierce was hit by a car crossing the street in Berkeley. Hit and run. The driver was never found. Jennifer received the news while sitting in the FBI field office in San Francisco. Her hands shook as she read the report. She looked up to find David Chen staring at her across the desk, his face grave. It wasn't an accident, David said quietly. The witness statements described the car deliberately accelerating toward her. Then it just vanished into traffic. Jennifer's blood ran cold. Someone was eliminating witnesses. Someone who knew Eleanor was talking. Someone with resources, with knowledge of law enforcement, with the ability to make people disappear and make it look natural. She pulled up Whitmore's service record again. And that's when she saw it. A detail so obvious she'd overlooked it. Whitmore hadn't worked alone. There was another guard mentioned in a training memo from 1962. A guard named Thomas Ashford. Jennifer ran the name through every database she had access to. Thomas Ashford had left the Bureau of Prisons in 1965, 2 years after Alcatraz closed. His employment file was sealed. No forwarding address. No pension records. It was as if he'd simply ceased to exist. Until Jennifer found a property deed from 1968. Thomas Ashford had purchased a home in Virginia. The house was registered to a consulting firm called Ashford and Associates. A consulting firm that, according to its tax filings, had contracts with the Department of Defense. Jennifer dug deeper, following the financial trail. Ashford and Associates had subcontractors, defense connections, political donations to influential senators. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized that Thomas Ashford hadn't just disappeared. He'd reinvented himself. He'd become powerful. And somewhere in that power structure, buried beneath decades of classified documents and redacted files, was proof of what happened to Robert Whitmore. Proof of the systematic torture and experimentation that happened beneath Alcatraz. But as Jennifer prepared her findings, preparing to take them up the chain of command, her apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. Just one thing was left on her desk, a photograph of her sister, taken that morning, going into her daughter's school. Attached was a simple message: "Stop looking. Some doors stay closed for a reason." Jennifer understood the message perfectly. They'd crossed a line. They knew who she was. They knew where her family was. And they were willing to reach across decades to protect their secrets. That's when Jennifer realized the terrifying truth. Robert Whitmore hadn't been killed by a vengeful inmate or a rogue guard. He'd been silenced because he was about to expose something so massive, so deeply embedded in the government itself, that people were still willing to kill to keep it hidden. And Thomas Ashford, the man who had helped run the program, was still alive. Still connected. Still dangerous. Jennifer was no longer investigating a cold case. She was hunting someone who had already proven they were willing to murder to stay in the shadows. And she was running out of time. Jennifer Cross made a decision that would either destroy the conspiracy or destroy her. She went underground. Literally and figuratively. Using her FBI credentials, she accessed the National Archives after hours. She brought nothing with her except a camera and a flash drive. For 6 hours, she photographed every document related to the Mindhouse Program that she could find. Psychological evaluations. Military correspondence. Budget allocations. Names. So many names. But the most damning document was a memo, dated March 15, 1963. It was typed on official FBI letterhead. The subject line read, "Whitmore termination, authorized." The signature at the bottom made Jennifer's breath catch. It was someone she recognized. Someone who had access to classified information. Someone whose career had spanned from Alcatraz all the way to the highest levels of the Bureau. It was Director James Mitchell. The current FBI director. Jennifer's hands trembled as she photographed the document. The memo outlined the decision to neutralize Whitmore before he could go public. It recommended using the existing underground infrastructure at Alcatraz as a containment facility. It authorized extended interrogation and medication to keep Whitmore compliant and silent. The memo was signed by 3 people: Director Mitchell, a military liaison named Colonel Richard Hayes, and one other signature that was harder to read. But the title beneath it made her freeze solid. Deputy Warden Thomas Ashford. Thomas Ashford hadn't just run the program. He was there at the end, when they decided to torture and murder a fellow officer to keep the secrets buried. Jennifer drove directly to a safe house in Marin County, a property she'd rented under an alias 3 days earlier. She uploaded all the files to 3 separate cloud accounts, set them to auto-release if she didn't check in every 24 hours, and then she did the only thing she could do. She called Thomas Ashford directly. "Mr. Ashford," she said when he picked up. "This is Special Agent Jennifer Cross with the FBI. I think we should talk about Robert Whitmore." There was a long pause. Then, "I'll meet you. Tomorrow. Alcatraz. 9 p.m. Come alone, or your sister dies." Jennifer's blood turned to ice. But she'd already expected this. She'd already set everything in motion. The next evening, she made her way across the bay to Alcatraz Island. The prison was closed to tourists after dark. The island was silent, shrouded in fog so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead. Her hand rested on the service weapon at her hip as she climbed toward the main prison building. Thomas Ashford was waiting for her in the D block, the most secure section of the original prison. He was 84 years old, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits. "Security. You've been very busy, Agent Cross," Ashford said, his voice steady and controlled. "Making phone calls. Accessing classified files. Trying to be a hero." "I'm trying to be honest," Jennifer replied. "Robert Whitmore deserves justice." Ashford laughed. A sound like breaking glass. Robert Whitmore was a fool who couldn't handle the weight of important work. He got weak. He got moral. "Do you understand what we were doing here? What we accomplished?" "Torture," Jennifer said coldly. "Illegal experiments. Murder." "Progress," Ashford corrected. "We were advancing the science of human psychology. We were understanding how the mind breaks and how it can be rebuilt. That research saved lives. American lives. In Vietnam. In intelligence operations. In national security. Robert Whitmore wanted to blow that up because he couldn't stomach the cost. So you killed him. So we contained him, Ashford said. We kept him comfortable. We kept him sedated. It was humane, considering the alternative. He took a step closer. And then you had to open that door. You had to dig up the past. Now I have to clean up the mess. One of the security guards raised a gun. But Jennifer was faster. Her training kicked in. One shot. The guard went down. Jennifer spun, but the second guard was already moving. His weapon came up. The gunshot echoed through the prison block. Jennifer felt the impact before she felt the pain. A burning sensation in her right shoulder. She stumbled backward, her vision swimming. But she kept her gun trained on Ashford. It's over, she gasped. Everything you did is documented. Every file, every name, every crime. It's already uploaded. If I don't check in within the hour, it goes public. The New York Times. The Washington Post. Congress. Everyone. Ashford's expression changed. For the first time, Jennifer saw fear in his eyes. You stupid girl, he whispered. Do you understand what you've done? The people connected to this program, they're everywhere. Pentagon. CIA State Department. You've just declared war on the entire intelligence apparatus of this country. Maybe, Jennifer said, her voice shaking with pain and adrenaline. But at least Robert Whitmore's death means something now. Ashford moved toward her. Jennifer's finger tightened on the trigger. But before she could fire, something unexpected happened. The door to the D block burst open. Federal agents flooded in. Real FBI agents. From the San Francisco field office. Leading them was David Chen, Jennifer's partner, his gun drawn and aimed directly at Ashford. Step away from the agent, David commanded. Ashford froze. His hands went up. Two agents rushed forward and secured him, reading his rights as they slapped handcuffs on his wrists. As they led him away, Ashford's eyes locked on Jennifer's. There was something in that gaze. Something that made her realize this wasn't over. Not even close. You think you've won, he said as they dragged him toward the exit. But you don't understand the depth of this. Mitchell authorized that memo 60 years ago. You think he's the only one. There are senators, generals, intelligence directors, all the way up. This goes deeper than you can imagine. And they will bury you. The aftermath. The case against Thomas Ashford was airtight. The documents Jennifer had photographed were authentic. The conspiracy was real. But within 48 hours, something shocking happened. Director James Mitchell held a press conference. He announced his immediate resignation, citing health reasons. He made no statement about the Whitmore case. He made no admission of wrongdoing. He simply vanished from public life. Thomas Ashford was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of Robert Whitmore. He received a life sentence at age 84. During the trial, he never testified. He never explained his actions. He simply sat in the courtroom, staring at nothing, day after day. Jennifer Cross was heralded as a hero. She received commendations. She was offered promotions. But something had changed inside her. She'd uncovered a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, and then she'd watched it be carefully controlled, contained, and ultimately minimized. No investigation was launched into the Mindhouse Program itself. No other conspirators were prosecuted. No declassified documents were released to the public. The story became a footnote in American history. A dark chapter that everyone acknowledged but nobody wanted to examine too closely. 3 months after Ashford's conviction, Jennifer received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Robert Whitmore, young and proud in his prison guard uniform, taken in 1962, before everything fell apart. On the back, someone had written a message in careful handwriting: "Some secrets are kept to protect the system. Others are kept to protect the people we love. Know the difference. A friend." Jennifer never found out who sent it. But she understood the message. Whoever had written it was telling her that the conspiracy was deeper than she knew. That other people, good people, had chosen to bury the truth not out of malice, but out of necessity. She'd won the battle but lost the war. 2 weeks later, a new body was discovered in the waters near Alcatraz. It was identified as Thomas Ashford. He'd been killed in prison, stabbed multiple times by a fellow inmate. The inmate, a man named Marcus Webb, confessed immediately. Webb had been a prisoner at Alcatraz during the Mindhouse Program. He'd been one of Ashford's victims. Jennifer attended Ashford's funeral. She stood alone, watching them lower his casket into the ground. And she realized something that chilled her to her core. Someone had gotten to Marcus Webb. Someone had arranged for Ashford to be killed, to silence him permanently, to make sure he could never talk about the conspiracy from behind prison walls. The same people Jennifer had threatened. The same people whose names were in those documents. As Jennifer walked back to her car, she made a call to David Chen. "I need to take some time off," she said. "A few months. Maybe longer." "You earned it," David replied. "You brought down one of the biggest conspiracies in FBI history." But Jennifer knew the truth. She hadn't brought down anything. She'd simply illuminated one small corner of a much larger darkness. And that darkness had adapted. It had survived. It was still out there, still connected, still powerful. The Alcatraz prison had officially closed in 1963. But the program, the conspiracy, the machine that had killed Robert Whitmore and countless others, it had never closed at all. It had simply moved. Evolved. Found new homes in new agencies. New names. New methods. And as Jennifer drove across the Golden Gate Bridge, watching Alcatraz disappear into the fog behind her, she made a decision. She would keep digging. She would keep searching. Because somewhere, in classified files and redacted documents, the real truth was still waiting to be found. And one day, when she had enough evidence, when she was certain enough people would listen, she would expose it all. No matter what it cost her. But that's a story for another time. Because sometimes, the most dangerous mysteries aren't the ones we solve. They're the ones we discover we've only just begun to understand. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. The files Jennifer discovered are still classified. The names in those documents are still protected. And somewhere, people are still working to keep them secret. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of America's hidden history. Because the truth about Alcatraz? This was just the beginning.